If you want a free week trial at The Athletic and not 20%, not 30%, not 40%, but 50% off your subscription, head over to theathletic.com/thinkingbasketball. They have a collection of the industry's best, including names like David Aldridge, former Grizzlies VP John Hollinger, and many more. They cover local teams, they're ad-free, you can customize your feed in their app, and you help support this channel by signing up at theathletic.com/thinkingbasketball for your free trial today. Here's a question. What exactly makes someone a great scorer? Isolation scoring is beautiful and impressive and receives the lion's share of focus, and it's what most people think of when envisaging scoring skills. But there is an overlooked world of artistry, skill, and activity without the basketball. And all of that movement and off-ball talent generates enormous scoring value too. Modern dribbling rules allow players to carve up defenses with breathtaking precision, but think about it. Isn't it easier just to run by someone without the ball? To juke them without even worrying about dribbling? Off-ball movement is so effective largely because there is no basketball. JJ Redick lacks the handle to break down opponents off the dribble, but without the ball he puts defenders in his rear view like a Dwayne Wade first step. Really, what's the difference? This little stop-and-go move here is the functional equivalent of beating someone with a successful hesitation dribble. Well, that's goodbye, Felicia. A huge advantage inherent to off-ball attacking is that defenders aren't always watching, as they always do against a dribbler. Here, Marcus Smart peeks at the ball handler, and that's enough to lose his mark. That doesn't happen when he's guarding the ball. This is from the same game against the same player, current Bulls point guard Tomas Satoransky, and it's not quite as easy with the ball. Another advantage here is that defenders will sag off players, which makes it easier to use screens. This is the off-ball operator's version of a pick and roll, where an otherwise weak dribbler can easily walk into an open shot. Without a ball to worry about, players can use their hands to create additional space, and another great perk is that help is slow to respond once an advantage is created. Tatum crosses Dinwiddie here with an imaginary ball, then can slow down to seal him on his back because defenders are focused on the basketball. Just like ball handlers in the complex pick-and-roll dance, off-ball artists read defenses too. Here, Landry Shamet's defender chases him high out to the three-point line, but that angle opens up a basket cut for a layup. Watch Joe Harris. Again, hands create separation, and because the defense goes under the screen to the left, Harris counters back into space for a jumper. Movement has been a cornerstone of organized basketball forever, running around screens in order to pop open for jumpers, or even better, find uncontested layups. But there were two major limitations of movement back when footage was grainy. First, spacing was congested. Since dribbling rules were far more restrictive, it was hard to self-create off the bounce. So the goal of all this movement was to pop open for long twos or occasionally spring backdoor for a layup. This split action here was a cousin of today's common split cuts, where players cross paths, giving them a number of route options depending on the defense. Only back then everything was so cramped all three players met in a phone booth. By the 1970s, more modern actions were used to spring shooters on the move. John Havlicek was active off screens like this, setting up floaters or drives, or even breaking free for a layup. The other major limiting factor back then was a lack of a three-point shot. That's an extra point today, and so defenses only chase shooters so far from the hoop. Rick Barry was probably the first notable star to weaponize his movement. Defenders had to worry about him popping out for a jumper, and that was enough for these violent backdoor cuts. This defender isn't even overplaying him, yet Barry's move just freezes him for a split second, and it's over. And part of this is that read and react game. Again, this defender is too high, so Barry blows by him, and the pass is there for another layup. Larry Bird was dangerous without the ball because of his great outside shooting, and he was one of the first stars of the three-point era to use additional space to set up his routes. Bird walks his man into this screen, then pushes off to create separation, flaring away from the hoop into open space to set up this little runner. By the way, Larry's off-ball activity also made him a dangerous offensive rebounder, constantly battling for position for post-ups and transitioning inside leverage into second chances. Michael Jordan lacked the outside range of players like Bird and Barry, but he wasn't idle off-ball, often hunting out gaps in a defense, and early Jordan regularly came off screens like this for mid-rangers. His change of direction athleticism made him dangerous without the ball too. Notice the hand fighting to help separate and create space on this little cut for a hovering 12-footer. But the first star to really master off-ball movement in the three-point era was Reggie Miller. Miller's game was innovative, built around quickness, perpetual movement, and historically good shooting. That little push-off there with his right hand isn't possible while dribbling, but it's a brutal counter when defenders crowded him. Reggie's cuts were sharp and explosive. That's his version of breaking ankles. And because he needed little daylight to shoot, he could set up on the baseline and sprint in either direction like a wide receiver, exploring route options. His man is stalking him here, so Miller reverses direction to the near corner as the ball changes sides, and that creates the clean look. Losing contact with Miller was problematic, and another advantage of the off-ball attack is a live dribble after up-faking like this. Miller used it at the end of this route for a little runner. If defenses overplayed his shooting, Reggie had counters. Nick Anderson is top-blocking here to take away the shot, so Miller knifes backdoor for a layup. If you tried to front him in open space, he could use those hands to escape, and his feel on when to countercut was exceptional. In this game, Orlando started switching his screening action to counter Reggie's movement, but Miller senses this switch waiting for him, so he backcuts anyway behind his own man for a layup. The timing and quickness of his movement, here knowing when to slip into space, combined with his shooting, made him an elite offensive player without much of a dribble game. A number of players have followed Miller's off-ball blueprint, the closest of which was Ray Allen. Allen was a comparable shooter who also mastered the art of using screens, moving constantly into sweet spots and hand-fighting to keep defenders on his terms. This is basketball grappling. Allen's preventing his man from controlling him, and he leverages a little push on the arm to create separation. Klay Thompson has also modeled his game off this movement-heavy style, backcutting opponents into oblivion because they need to spend all of their time chasing him around screens as he reins in catch-and-shoot jumpers throughout the game. But it's Klay's teammate, Steph Curry, who has taken movement to a new level. Curry is the greatest shooter ever, and so he only needs a sliver of airspace once he's within about 30 feet of the hoop. He has all of the typical foundations of a movement-heavy star, curling off of screens for catch-and-shoot finishes, or even walking players into screens as others have before him. Notice how he guides Paul George here, driving him back into the screener so he's completely picked off on this designed action. Of course, Steph has counters too. Zach LaVine set up well here to take away his loop route, so Curry reverses, and when LaVine bites, it's a double move and a race to the corner that LaVine can't win. One way Steph has extended the art of off-ball movement is by backpedaling into these shots. Larry Bird and others did this, but Curry literally runs backwards to toe up three-pointers. This is yet another counter to ball denial, and he uses the same wrist control we saw from Ray Allen to buckle his opponent long enough to out-sprint him backwards into space for a clear three. Curry is probably the handsiest of the great off-ball players, penalizing opponents who try to maintain contact with him by nudging them off balance or using hand fighting as a leverage point to cut into a route with Jerry Rice-level precision. He also has a rope-a-dope down, lulling defenders to sleep before upshifting into space. He'll pretend that his cut has failed, but it's a ruse because Curry is constantly moving, which always makes him dangerous. This perpetual motion has birthed his famous relocation move, where he darts out to the three-point line after passing on a drive. Constant movement is so difficult to guard, especially when there's a switch involving a big who must chase him out to the line, and relocation is a natural blending point between an on-ball attack and an off-ball cut, layering on a counter after the defense thwarted that initial drive. Oops. Curry's so cagey with his movement that he's even run opponents into their own teammates at times, turning a second defender into a screener that he can slide around. And of course, his entire cat and mouse game has led to some of the nastiest ankle breakers you'll find with the ball, dropping even the best defenders with these air crossovers. In today's game, spacing and shooting have arguably made high-level movement more valuable than ever. The entire league runs versions of this little slip play where screeners can audible into a basket cut, and staggered screens were all the rage this year. Great route runners can pick the right seam to dart through, giving off-ball players multiple counters on these designed plays. Even poor outside shooters are significantly more dangerous with a well-timed cut into space. The so-called ghost cut the Legends used has become commonplace as a way to enhance corner shooters. Some teams love this face cut now out of the corner, where a well-timed sprint in front of a defender is enough to create separation. And movement is also a great way to punish double teams, sliding into the wider gaps against a three-man defense. Finally, I should note great passing helps. Some of these passes are easy, but playing with great passers amplifies the value of great cutters. When we add it all up, movement is one of the most important elements of NBA basketball. Structured movement creates advantages that are hard to take away because you can't stop the other team from setting screens. And the counters off of these screens are difficult to defend because of the built-in advantages of moving without a ball. Because there's 75 feet of three-point line to cover in the NBA, the most dangerous movers are elite shooters, who are difficult to chase around that much real estate without giving up high-value shots. In my assessment, many of the great scorers in league history are primarily movement-driven. So while isolation scoring is really important, off-ball scoring is also incredibly important. And for most players, the easiest way to create value while on the court is just by moving well without the basketball. Be sure to check out that deal at theathletic.com/thinkingbasketball. If you want a more detailed breakdown of Reggie Miller, Klay Thompson, and Ray Allen, I go into detail on the Thinking Basketball podcast, episode number 51. Episode number 50 of the podcast ranks the greatest scorers in history, many of whom are driven by their off-ball game. If you want to support this channel and find a special cut of Steph Curry's movement based on this video, head over to patreon.com/thinkingbasketball for more articles, historical stats, and community discussion. And wherever you are in the world, I hope you're safe, I hope you're healthy, and of course, I hope you're having a great day.